when I look back at 2021, I do courses, and this is where I get to really get to know people, and I know their names. Like I can say everybody who's been in that course with me, and I can see their success or their struggles or what they're doing. It's kind of like there's the big stuff and the YouTube and the podcast, and then the people who want more help on the class. There's been a lot of that, and that's satisfying. Hey everyone, welcome to the Real Estate and Financial Independence Podcast. This is a special episode. This is number 200.
Woo!
And I am flipping the switch this week where instead of me interviewing somebody else, I brought a special friend of mine. This is my friend, Matt Wiggins. Matt has been here, been a friend of mine since middle school, 6th grade, I believe we met. And we've crossed paths a lot. He's also had businesses in the online media space, kind of like I've done with Coach Carson, and just thought it'd be fun to flip the table a little bit. I interview a lot of people every week, and I thought it'd be fun for this 200th episode, the last episode of the year, to have Matt interview me so that all of you can, learn a little bit more of the story behind what's going on here at Coach Carson. So Matt, just thanks for being here.
Yeah, well, I'm really excited to be here, Chad. And man, we've been friends forever and going way back. And so the chance to get to help everybody else know you a little bit better like I know you is awesome. It's an awesome opportunity. So I'm super excited about it.
Yeah. Well, let's do it. So I think I'm going to turn the mic over to Matt.
All right.
And then let you control the interview. So this is I'm a little nervous, but let's do this.
All right. Well, so knowing you so long, it's just been fun to watch you go through all the things you've gone through, and even the days back, playing college football and everything else, and just kind of seeing you go through all these growth phases of learning things and trying new things. And so one thing I've always wanted to know and ask you about and really get deep down with you about is like the purpose behind Coach Carson and all these things that you've been doing. Like, what drives you? What drove you at the beginning? How about that? What kind of woke you up in the morning and drove you at the beginning when it wasn't so easy, when you didn't have any subscribers or followers or anything? Like, what was it that drove you?
Yeah, it was actually kind of an accidental beginning when I first started, because a lot of people know I was investing in real estate since I was 23, and that was even accidental. I thought I was going to go to medical school. I know you've had you've had a lot of working with doctors and helping them with disability insurance and different things. And I was thinking about going that route, and I thought I would just take a year or two off. And as you know, my dad had rental properties growing up, and so I always knew about it, but I thought I would just take a chance and say, you know what, if I learn about real estate a little bit, start this thing, then I can go back and do like a real job, quit real job later on. And that just never stopped. Like, I love being an entrepreneur so much that I just kept doing it. But along the way, one of the things I learned about myself is that one of my favorite things to do, and I think hopefully what I'm good at, is just learning and being a student of the game. And whether it was football, when we played football, that was, I was pretty athletic, but I was always the best student on defense. I studied film, and I did that. And for real estate, it's the same way. Like I had to pay to go to like classes and seminars and read books, but I mean, I would pay like all the time to learn. Like, that's just fun for me to do. And so I learned pretty early on, even in my real estate business, that I enjoyed learning. And so the other side of learning is teaching. And I actually always respected, your parents, because your parents were some of my teachers. My math teacher in middle school was your mom.
We were in the same class with my dad. I think you made better grades than I did, but yeah.
You looked at my paper, didn't you? No,
probably.
Just kidding. Matt was we equally well in class, but I always loved good teachers. I felt like teachers and coaches, and your dad was my football coach too. I always loved the passion that they gave to their students and their players, and particularly high school coaches, because they weren't getting paid big bucks to do it. They were doing it because they loved it. And I love learning, and I love the light bulb moment that I would get when I learned something new and applied it. And it's like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And so I got the opportunity early on in real estate investing, probably 4 or 5 years after I started. A local real estate club asked me to come speak and teach about some of how are you finding deals, Chad? How are you finding these? And I just shared for 30 minutes, and it was just fun. Like, I enjoyed doing that. And that just was a seed planted in my head. And fast forward a little bit, I started in 2003, 2009. I took that, became more serious with it, where I had this opportunity to start with a small group of people. I think it was 6 or 7 people, and people were asking me a little bit for some consulting and coaching, because we were doing pretty well with real estate. And I said, instead of doing one-on-one, why don't I start this little group of a mastermind group, basically, of people in South Carolina and North Carolina. And I just coached them and helped them. And for 6 months, just, taught them as much as I could. And I didn't know everything, of course, but it lit a light bulb in my head. Like, wow, this is really fun. And that was the start of Coach Carson. It was just that small mastermind group. And I'm still friends with every one of those 7 people that I coached that year. But it kind of got me in the mode of flipping it around from being only the student. I'm still a student today, but being the teacher, being the coach. How does this real estate thing work? If I really had to explain it to somebody else? And that's the epitome of being a teacher, is that you have to figure out how things work. Right. You have to be the best student if you're going to explain it and boil it down. And so I started thinking about, well, if you were to find a good real estate deal, how would you do that? How would I explain that in simple terms? Or if you were going to run the numbers on a real estate deal, what's the simplest way to do that? Or what's the most important way to do that? So it sort of put me on this kind of quest to try to boil things down and simplify them and take notes. And that led to eventually starting writing them down on a newsletter. We can fast forward from there, but it was all on a local level. Like it was just sort of following my passion. And I didn't think it would turn into what it's turned into today. I had no idea, the internet, we're kind of dating ourselves, right? But I had no idea that it would be a YouTube channel, a podcast, a blog, but I knew I loved teaching, and that was really what started it.
Yeah. They talk about how good teachers, they take complex things and make them simple. I think that maybe that's what you've been successful at, because I remember the first time I came back, I lived in Nebraska, for almost 2 decades. And I came back at some point in time and we were talking about what you were doing. And I think after about 5 minutes in the car, I was like, I have no idea what he's talking about, but I'm just going to keep nodding my head. You were talking about the financing side of things and different things like that. But as I've listened to your podcast and watched videos through the years and everything, taking those things that the average public, the average person doesn't really even think about or know about, and making it simple so we can, dip our toe in the water of real estate or think through. That's been a gift of yours and really good.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. So, all right, still thinking about the early years, like so many people want to know the backstory of hard times or difficulties you went through or whatever. When you're thinking about starting up Coach Carson and kind of obviously you learn through sometimes trial and error and things like that. Do you have anything that you're like, this was really a mistake I made early on, or this was a hard thing I had to get through, or a hump I had to get over to really keep going and make it successful?
Yeah. I mean, I've always been I've been very fortunate to have a lot of kind of legs up, you build on the shoulders of other people. And so, but for me with coaching, my dad was a real estate investor for years. So I always had him kind of as a mentor and a coach. And I felt like that was a good example to try to be for other people. So I already mentioned the mastermind group and helping other people, but I think this isn't necessarily a failure, but what I did for years was kind of stay on that local level. And I wrote a newsletter. Like I spent hours every month. And it was a print newsletter. Like, people get my email newsletter now. I was printing out this. I think I was on some newsletters that other people had. So this is 2009, 10, 11, or maybe 9 and 10. I'm sending out this like print newsletter. I'm folding, I'm getting it printed at the local copy shop, putting it in this, and I was mailing it to like 70 people maybe, or 50 people who I had coached locally. And I'm spending hours and hours writing this for 50 people. And in a way, like I say, this is like the pluses and minuses. Like when you think, know about scaling any business, eventually you want to do the same amount of work and have like a little bit broader impact. That way it makes more sense as a business. Maybe it makes more sense from a mission standpoint to impact more people. I think it was a blessing in some ways though, because it forced, those are the early days. I'd probably be embarrassed, like, if, see some of what I wrote those days, and it was just, blah, 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 I'm sure some of it was helpful, but I doubt many people were reading all of that. But I did that for like a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, sending out these monthly newsletters, printing them out, doing all this work. And like, I think I was spinning my wheels a little bit with that. And I went to a conference, FinCon, which you and I have now both been to. Right. And I started going to these classes, and people were like, yeah, you write this and you put it on a blog, and it's like almost nothing expense-wise to do that. Right. And then people everywhere can read this, not just in South Carolina and North Carolina. And I was like, oh, really? Like, I should have done this like 3 years ago. What am I doing? So it's kind of the
aha moment of I can proliferate this and expand it. And,
yeah. So, I mean, that I think, not necessarily a mistake, but I look back on that and say, well, why didn't I just like put that on a blog in the first place? Because the early days of blogging and internet, 2008, 9, and 10, people were doing that. I think that would have been a good move earlier. But at the same time, I go back and look at it and say, the first time you do anything, riding a bike, speaking a language, it's very awkward to do that. And so it was nice. The people, I appreciate those first 50, 60 people, because they were, hopefully it was helpful to them, but they were also giving me good feedback and, helping me out as a teacher too.
Gotcha. Yeah. So that's really interesting. So you kind of took us through this idea of you were started out and you were just grinding it out. You're printing, you're mailing stuff. I mean, I think I remember talking to you at the time and I was like, is this thing really going to fly?
Probably not.
Yeah. But you're such a hard worker. I knew you're successful at everything you do. So I knew it'd be successful in some way. And it seems like that kind of going to FinCon and kind of getting this idea of doing it online took it to a new place. When was the time when you just said, this thing's really going to work? Like people are liking this. They need this. Like, and you saw things growing. Like, when was that?
Yeah, I think so. The blog, CoachCarson.com, I started writing articles, and the big aha moment that kind of helped me get outside of my own little box was collaborations. And it's always about people, whether it's real estate or any other business or anything in life, really. It's about those relationships with people. And I just met a few people, and I think one of the first, if he was even listening to this, I could thank him for this. Carl at 1500days.com is a friend. He's a blogger. His wife, Mindy Jensen, is at Bigger Pockets now. He put a couple of my articles on his website and let me write an article, or he featured me or something. And a few people started like trickling back over to my website. Same with Bigger Pockets. I started writing blog articles on Bigger Pockets, and then Josh and Brandon, Brandon Turner, and then Josh Dorkin were doing the podcast. So I got in some of the early episodes of the Bigger Pockets podcast, and I was a guest on their podcast. That really helped, of course. And so in the online business world, it's about kind of, somebody else has an audience. Bigger Pockets had an audience. If I'm on their show, they listen to me and they're like, oh, that sounds interesting. I like what Chad's talking about. And then they follow up with you and they go to, and so if I had a blog and they say, hey, follow up with Chad at CoachCarson.com, and then people came over. So I think when those two things happened, the Bigger Pockets thing, I think was first. And then getting on a couple of these other blogs, people I'd met at FinCon,
Gotcha.
I started seeing that, okay, like I had those 80 people I had who were reading my newsletter at first, or maybe not even reading it. Now there's hundreds of people, or maybe even 1,000 people per month who are reading it. And I was like, that's interesting. Like that's, I was still doing the same thing, still typing away and trying to teach, but this could be a little broader than I thought it would be.
Yeah, that's so important, collaboration. It is all about people, right? Whatever we're doing, it's about helping people and finding a need to help people, and then collaborating with people and cross-pollinating audiences and things like that. That's awesome. All right, so I saw something on a little diagram that you drew up, and it showed the whole thing, what is it, skill, need, passion, and it comes together, and you're right in the center. So we've talked a little bit about the skill with teaching, and I can hear your passion and all of that, but like, describe that whole the three rings. Like, describe it to me. Like, what was the need that you saw at the time? Is that need still there? Is it bigger? How does that like correlate with your passion? That kind of thing.
Yeah. So Matt, I do a mastermind or mind maps. I showed Matt, but before this interview,
it's incredible, by the way.
I do lots of scribbling on pieces of paper. I need to do a podcast episode on mind mapping and just thinking with that creatively. But yeah, for me, like the Coach Carson business has been harder for me than the real estate business. Like real estate, if you can think about any business. I think I learned this from Jim Collins' is a book on Good to Great or something like that. But it was like you find this little intersection of three things: your passion. Like, what are you passionate about? What could you do? What would you pay to do? Like me learning, Right. What would you pay to do no matter what? What are you good at? So if you're really passionate about it, like I love playing basketball, but I'm not good enough to go to the NBA. So like my skill level has a ceiling, right? Yeah. And so what are you really passionate about? What do you actually have skill at? And then third, and most importantly for a business or any mission driven thing, is what do people need? Like, so if your skill and your passion meet where people need something, that's a magic place. Like that's something that can really, you can feel on purpose, you can have fun, you can contribute, and people can really use what you have to give. So the real estate is pretty straightforward. People need housing. They need a place to live. Sure. There's a lot of slumlords and people who have bad housing. If you can provide good housing and you can do it affordably and you can do it in a way that also makes you money, then that can be fun. And real estate for me has always been fun. But even on another level for me, passion-wise, it was teaching. And so I think that's where I started gravitating towards this. And the thing that was, hopefully a need is that real estate's kind of complicated and there's so many moving pieces. And the concept of real estate is pretty simple. You buy a house, people have to live in houses and apartments. Sure. But there's just people when they're first starting, it's a little overwhelming. Like, all right, which piece do I start at? How do I get the financing? This is a $300,000 decision maybe, and I'm borrowing money. Like this is so stressful, and I've got a family. Mm-hmm. So I think that's that challenge emotionally for a lot of people, and then knowledge-wise is that need that I identified. And it was with those first, 6 or 7 people. Like those are smart people who were very competent in other things they did in life, and they're wonderful people. They just had a little gap there. They're a little stuck. And so as any teacher or coach does, you just give them feedback and you listen to them and say, all right, what is the place they're getting stuck on? And sometimes just giving them a little bit of feedback or explaining it in a different way or framing it in a different way. And so that goes back to the learning. And so I think just listening to people over the years, even today, like getting YouTube comments, the more positive, productive ones. There's some negative ones too.
Yeah, sure.
And then the podcast, getting emails from people, and then getting when I do courses, getting people saying that was really helpful, or can you help me with this? Like that. That's the lifeblood of what this Coach Carson thing has been. It's just, all right, people say they need it and I'm getting good feedback. Here's what they also like to learn. Let me make another video about that. Let me do another podcast about that. That's how it's grown from the beginning. I just kept writing articles about what people told me they wanted to learn. And it's pretty much been that way, whether it's a course or whether it's a video. It's just trying to find that sweet spot. And I still love the topic. I still love teaching. I don't know, 20 years from now, maybe that won't, maybe I want to go to something different. But for right now, to me, the fact that money and real estate is sort of a vehicle towards this bigger concept, do what matters, in the background, is that I just feel like a lot of people right now are frustrated with their work. They're frustrated with the place they are in life, particularly in your 20s, 30s, 40s. You're kind of getting maybe a little cynical about what you thought was, even if it's a good profession, you're like, this is not what I got signed up for. Or people are making me work in a way that really doesn't resonate with my family, or I'd like to travel more, or I like to work less. And so many people are saying that, and yet that's that gap. Like, how do I get there? And it's not necessarily having $100 million, $1 million. It might just be having an emergency fund. It might be having this little side hustle to make some extra money. Just that every little step you take towards a little bit more financial independence gives people more ability to control their time. And that time is what I'm passionate about, because I know there's people out there who are not doing what they're called to do and what they should be doing in life, and they know it, and it's bothering them inside.
They feel trapped, kind of.
Yeah. And so I want to, that's what Do What Matters, my motto of this whole channel means, is that I want to help unlock that for people, whether that's just giving them a little bit of feedback, whether that's giving some kind of advice around real estate, whether that's just giving them a story of somebody I interview on the podcast and they're like, oh, that's like me. I think I could do that. And that's so fun. Like I love it. And that's what keeps me coming back every week.
Gotcha. Well, hey, that's a great segue, because I was going to say, it's on the shirt, it's back here, Do What Matters, right?
Yeah.
So it's a simple slogan. But for those of you who don't know, Chad actually lives this out. So I'd love for you to share a little about that. Like, what are some things that matter to you? What are the do what matter things for you that you've worked hard to get to the place where you can do more of them?
Yeah, I mean, nobody's perfect, right? But the roles that I really are aspiring to be as a husband and a father, that's been, I think early on when you first have kids, for those of you who do have kids, that moment when you're like, oh my, this kid is in our care, and I don't know why, because I'm not ready for this. But having more time to be able to be with them. We've taken a trip to Ecuador. For us, not everybody travels abroad and does that, but for us, that was a way to slow life down. Like, I think I needed it maybe more than the rest of my family. Like, I needed to detach myself from the go, climb, because if you're good at it, you keep doing it. Sure. And so for me, doing what matters was, all right, let's carve out time to be a father, to be a husband, to go on, spending more time with them, quality time with them. And forcing that is a kind of a habit in your life. And sometimes people don't have any control over that. I understand that. Like, you're working a job just to make ends meet, just to pay the bills. You're digging yourself out of holes. There's times in life where you just can't do that. And that's understandable. But I think for me, that's been the motivation, is that it's not to build a huge real estate empire, just to have a plaque on the wall that says, congratulations, you have 1,000 properties. It's been, hey, is this thing paying for some lifestyle so that I free up all that time that I would spend working to do other things that matter? So yes, family, travel, learning, growing as a human being, just trying to get better. I always like that. Like when you and I were in high school, I feel like that optimism you have when you're a 16, 17, 18-year-old is so awesome. Like, I think that's, and sometimes my 30 and 40-year-old friends, I feel that like still there in there somewhere, but it kind of gets squashed down a little bit. And I love this idea that as middle of your life, you could say, what do I want to do new? Yeah, you're starting, you're transitioning from a company you used to be a part of, and now you're doing new things and traveling with your family. Like, that's,
you've kind of inspired me a little bit. So this Do What Matters thing, it can be, even if you're in that place where you're just trying to dig out, it's like to have that goal that I'm going to spend more time doing what matters,
right?
Not just living my life. I think it was a fallacy of a previous generation that I'm just going to put my head down, work my tail off, and eventually one day I'm going to wake up in this bliss called retirement.
Right.
And they missed all the years of their kids growing up, or they missed all these years when they were more healthy or whatever. So I think when you and Carrie and the girls took off for Ecuador for like a year and a half, my wife and I were like, what in the world? But I think seeing that, I was like, yeah, what really does matter? And do we really have to delay doing things that matter? Or can we find a way to do it now? And so it's been awesome.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Yeah, y'all are inspiring as well now. And yeah, I think that's, I mean, every recipe looks a little different, right? Every person's life looks different. And that's what's beautiful about it. It's like our life isn't like yours. But I think there's a common theme there that most of us, if we had more control over our day-to-day life, would probably do things a little differently. Oh. And so that's the question I asked. This is a money kind of education business. Like I'm trying to teach people about money and real estate, but it's really like the question behind the money is, if money were no object, if you could wave your magic wand and you had plenty of money today, like how would you reorient your life? Like what would you do differently on a day-to-day basis? What would you do differently on a big picture basis? And that's an exciting question, but it's also a scary question. It's the question that 16, 17, 18-year-olds ask. They're like, what am I going to do when I grow up? Like, I don't, it's a little, it drives you like a little panic. Like, I don't know. But it's important. I think it's like, there's Abraham Maslow was a psychologist in the 20th century. And he had this kind of framework of thinking like is a pyramid of needs. Like we all have needs. We have to put food on the table. We have to have oxygen. We have a need for connection with other people and love. And we have a need for some status. But ultimately, like when some of these basic needs get taken care of, we also have this need. He called it the need for self-actualization. It was a need to like what you can be, you must be. Like if you're a poet and you're not writing, then something's up. If you're a preacher and you're not preaching, something's up. If you're a teacher and you're not teaching, you're going to have this like angst inside of you. And I think that's, this is a first world problem, right? Like there are people who are hungry today. And so like, I recognize that's a big deal, but there's a lot of us out there. And this is, I think, equally important, who are having that crisis of purpose and identity. And money is not the thing that's going to solve that. Like you could have $100 million and still have a crisis of identity. But I think if taken in balance, if you can take care of like your basic needs and have that taken care of, it opens up that space. And that's what drives me. That's what I'm passionate about to my best ability. I'm trying to figure out with my own life how to do that, through spending more time with family, as I said, but also, just what makes me fulfilled as a person and doing this, like having conversations with other people. I love that. I love learning, love traveling, love playing pickup basketball during the week, in the middle of the week. There's like the little things like that are being able to exercise and stay fit and eat healthier. It takes more time to eat healthy, right? It takes more time to prepare meals and do that. And if we're busy, you don't always get to do that. So I think it's all of that, it's that whole never perfect, but just trying to aspire to kind of keep getting a little bit better.
Yeah. I remember when you were first starting out, one of the things I just remembered, Chad had, this is funny, Chad had these note cards, I think they were, and they had statements on them. And the statements were things that were either goals of yours or they were positive statements or whatever. And you told me how you would go and open your drawer every morning and read these statements and see them. So I'm actually curious. I never saw them. What were some of these statements that you would tell yourself when you were starting out, like to keep yourself going or motivate yourself or whatever? Do you remember?
That's true. I journal all the time, but I'm trying to think early on, it was probably early 2003 and 4 when I was starting the business. I think I read Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. Some of them, I can remember some were kind of ridiculous. It was like, I'm going to make, $1 million a year. So it's just, but that's your journey, right? I mean, it's like you start off with like, all right, that's what I want to do. But then pretty quickly you're like, wait a minute. Like, I think my business partner, Tommy, reminded me of this. He's like, let's just make a list of the things we want to do. Like, forget about the money. And it was like play basketball in the middle of the day for 2 hours. It was travel and take a hike, take hikes in the middle of the week, go travel abroad with my wife, eventually became my wife. Those are the things that eventually like start writing those things down. So every morning I journal and it could be 2 minutes. It could just be, it's more about your identity. Like, so who are you as a, in your relationships, who are you as a professional? Like what kind of impact do you want to make professionally on the world? And just kind of narrowing it down there as a person and your different roles in life and trying to keep it as basic as possible. Those are the kind of things I typically write down, either goals or maybe like, mantras or identities that you want to try to embody?
Well, it was good because I just remember like you were so hyper focused, even in those early, newsletter days or whatever. And even when you couldn't describe anything to me, I could understand what you're doing. It's like, but you were focused on this. So it was good. Yeah. So let's switch gears just a little bit. Let's move on to like today, like this past year. I know that we're kind of doing a little bit of a year-end thing here. And like, talk to me a little bit about this last year. What were some of the successes that you just really feel like we've reached this place, or I've done this thing, or, and it can be personal, it can be business-wise or whatever. And maybe some things you look back on, you wish you would have done better or something. Just give us a sense of the year.
Yeah, I think maybe other people can identify with this. Part of this is just post-COVID, just like, hey, we're here, we're together, we're like, where everybody's in a decent place. And not everybody's that way right now. I think that's a success personally for 2021. We our family, we did some. I know your family does homeschool. We did homeschooling or virtual schooling.
Everyone did for a little while.
Yeah, for last year, and and it was there's some challenges there. Just I think not being prepared for it and just being put in that position, and so this year was kind of back to a little bit more to normal in terms of the schedule for us at least. So I think personally, we've not done as much traveling as we normally do, and we're really itching to do that. And I think next year, just kind of going forward, maybe do some more of that. But I think this year is a really good, from a professional, personal standpoint, just stability and just, our kids just getting involved in activities, and they did plays and theater, and I really had fun just kind of seeing them blossom in that kind of role. That was the highlight for me. And then, I've been focusing a lot less on like the big picture, huge goals, and more on like the habits and like processes that really make me feel better as a person. Mm-hmm. And so sleeping better has been like the last 2 years. For me, I go to bed really late and then still get up early, and you get that 5 or 6 hours of sleep. Mm-hmm. And I knew that didn't make me feel good. So just trying to be more disciplined in that. Like I've had I've borrowed this from other people too, from Brian Johnson, and Optimize is a kind of a coaching program I've done online, but it's called Digital Sunset, where, at 9:30 has been my goal. It started off at 10:30. Now it's 9:30. My cell phone's off. I'm not looking at it. Put it in a drawer, turn it off, whatever, so I don't even look at it. Mm-hmm. Just like, that's been more of a success this year. Not perfect, but like, there's just like kind of layering on some of these habits that I feel like, all right, that makes me a better person if I'm not looking at my cell phone until late at night, so I can actually get some sleep and go to bed by 11 o'clock. Like, those have been, 2021 has been pretty good in that respect. But then, beyond that kind of personal stuff, I think professionally, it's been really humbling to see some of the scope of what, like, going back to our prior conversation, 50 people or 10 people that I was talking to, YouTube channel went over 1 million views this year. Wow. Really started focusing on YouTube a lot. The podcast went over 1 million downloads. The blog has been over 1 million views for a while. When I start thinking about millions of people have listened to this or watched that here we are sitting in my little office in my house. Like, there's a way my head doesn't get around that. But then I think what makes that real for me is that I do courses, and this is where I get to really get to know people, and I know their names. Like, I can say everybody who's been in that course with me, and I can see their success or their struggles or what they're doing. And just it's been a kind of constant thing every year now. Twice a year, we do the real estate deal school. I get to know people. There's people buying properties after we do that property, after we do that class. Mm-hmm. And so I think that, it's kind of like there's the big stuff and the YouTube and the podcast, and then the people who want more help on the class. Like that, when I look back at 2021, there's been a lot of that, and that's satisfying. Like, I'm doing, for me, like, going back to that kind of those 3 things: passion, skill, and need. I think there's people who need what we're talking about here, and it's really satisfying to know that hopefully there's some people we're helping out with that.
Yeah, and you don't have to necessarily name any names or anything, but can you give us an idea of a success story? Someone that you saw do something this year they wouldn't have done if they hadn't been a part of a course of yours or listened to your podcast or whatever, that they've given you feedback and said, I did this because of this,
Yeah, this is a real story. Like, there's somebody they're in a kind of major metropolitan area, which a lot of people, the prices are really high in those areas. And so this person was like, all right, I'm in my 20s. I'm willing to do house hacking, which is where you move into a property, live in one unit, rent the other unit out. They chose a strategy. I guess that's the main point. And there's different strategies for people to do. And the real thing about this was, like, he chose that strategy. He chose a market to start looking in. He went for like 4 or 5 months and stuck, like not working, making offers, not working. And this is the real part, is he pivoted and he said, I'm going to try this different city. I'm going to try a little different strategy. I'm just going to buy a house that can turn into a rental property eventually, but it's not like, it didn't fit the original mold that he thought he had to be in, but he was kind of opening himself up to some opportunities, and he ended up buying a house that he and I think his fiance or his wife can move into. And it also makes financial sense. And it's in a city that has a little bit more opportunity. And so that's just one example. Like a lot of what I'm helping people, it's like the very granular level, like which market are you going to invest in? What's your strategy? Where are you going to get the money? And we all get stuck at different places. And I was just proud of him and all the other people in those situations, because you have to pivot. Like you hit this wall, right. You think that's what you're going to do. And then you got to pivot and you got to pivot. It's like a sailboat, kind of keeps tacking back and forth. And I think that demonstrates a lot of what I think people who are successful, and I'm helping, in what way I can, just through the framework of the course, is that it gives them some structure, enough structure to move forward. But then it also gives them, all right, here's the menu of items. Like if you're getting stuck, go back to the fundamentals. Like in football, go back to blocking and tackling, go back to conditioning. Like here, it's not the like high, pie in the sky kind of stuff. This is just like the stuff that works. And every time it doesn't work, you just go back to the fundamentals. And I think that's what I'm proud of. It's just that it's not, throwing crazy ideas at people. It's just saying, these are the basics that work. Let's go apply that to all the different cities everywhere. Like it's not, one little strategy is not always going to work. And that's an example of somebody who was able to kind of adapt and make it work this year.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's great. So thinking about next year, what do you see for next year? Like, what are you thinking about? What are you going to be doing? Is there kind of like a little bit of a preview, I guess, for next year?
Yeah, some of it will be more of what was worked this year. So the people listen to the podcast, I'm planning on having a podcast episode every Friday or every Monday, just like we've had. This will be the one that kind of kicks it off for the year. YouTube videos probably every Friday. Like those have been a lot more work for me. Those have been fun and challenging. It's like a new growth area for me, like almost like filmmaking, like which is not my thing, but like how does this work? Telling stories on videos and what makes the most sense for people. But a lot of that's going to be similar. And then, I think the other thing I'm thinking about doing, this is the first time I've talked about it on the podcast. It's not 100% yet, but I'm talking about writing another book next fall. And that's, my wife jokes, is that we often have to like go travel somewhere so I can write a book, or not often. That last time we went to Ecuador, I wrote the book, Retire Early with Real Estate. So we're talking about with the family going in fall and spring of next year to Europe and going to Spain and having the girls rekindle their Spanish. And so I guess I need to write another book.
So any hints on what the book might be about, or?
Yeah, it's the one I'm playing around with is this idea that people in the podcast will probably be familiar with, but it's the small and mighty real estate investor. It's going to be some topic around that. And my first book was more strategic. It was like, all right, so if you want to build wealth over the next 10 years and be able to live off your wealth, like here are several routes up the mountain. Here's how you can do that. Here's some steps you want to take. Then once you get there, here's how you can live off your income. So it's kind of like a higher level, like a blueprint basically to build a house. Well, this book is going to be more like the tactical part. It's going to take that same idea and say, okay, here you are, the small and mighty investor. You're not this big, huge real estate investor who's going to buy 1,000 units. You might buy 5 properties, 2 properties, 10 properties. And here's how it works on a day-to-day basis. Here's how you find the property. Here's how you manage it. Here's like the things that you might run into, the biggest mistakes people make when they own a rental property. And then kind of show those tactics and those, it's almost like a handbook. Like if you wanted to go, hopefully you get the first one is like the guidebook, like to tell you where to go, like on the map. And then this one will be like, what happens when I do that? Like what happens when I do that? It'll be, I wanted to share a lot of this in the first book, and my editors were like, now you have like a 400-page book. Like you need to like take this tactical part out. And it worked for that book. But this will be more, I'm hoping will be helpful for people to use and apply, and it really also, just big picture wise, validate these small investors who say, I just want to have a few properties, and will that be enough? Can I actually like do what I want to do with 3 properties? And my answer will be like, yes, absolutely. And here's how you can do it. Here's what that would look like if you had 3 properties and you managed them. Maybe you paid them off, maybe you didn't, but just showing some of those tactical sides of real estate investing.
Yeah, that sounds way better than my idea. My idea was for you to write a book about how your best friend in middle school inspired you to do all of this by playing multiple games of Monopoly with you at a time.
Oh, good.
That was all about real estate, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't even remember what your strategy was. You just bought everything, didn't you? Everything you could? Or?
I think I did. I used lots of leverage, and So Matt and I, we would play basketball for like 2 or 3 hours outside, and then we come in and play Monopoly, and I don't remember what our strategy was, but
we got Monopoly down to a science. We would go around the board 2 or 3 times, and then we'd start over because we already knew who was going to win based on which properties you got and everything. Yeah, we played way too much of that, and we got good at that.
It was fun. It was fun. Yeah, I'll put that story in there too.
Okay.
Definitely. I appreciate that.
Lessons you learned from playing Monopoly.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
Cool. Awesome. All right. So I just had this. I have this picture of. I guess I kind of know what makes you tick a little bit, and you've been able to share that today and everything. I'm picturing Chad and Matt sitting around one day, maybe like 30 years from now, we can barely hobble around, or telling stories, and repeating the same things over and over again or whatever. Yeah. But I'm just thinking, like, what is it going to be when you're later on, you're looking back on Coach Carson, you're looking back on all of this, like, what is it going to be that you look back that you're most proud of, a legacy you've left that you're excited about? Like, what is it that you envision getting there and saying, this was worth it and this was good?
Yeah, I love that question. It's a tough one. I think there's a couple layers that come to mind for me. One of them is just very personal, that I'm very focused on, like, legacy for my kids. What do they see? And I just want to demonstrate being the type of person that hopefully they will be. At least I don't want them to be like me. I want them to do their own thing. But maybe I've if here's what I'm capable of being, here's what I'm capable of doing, that they've looked at it and said, Dad was really pushing. He was trying to be like the best he could be. And so I think Coach Carson is a vehicle for me to do that, particularly as a leader. I think I've seen myself as a reluctant leader, whether it was in sports or in this business too. Like I felt like, I just want to stay in the background, or I just want to kind of do my thing. But then there's always been the push for me to say, no, you got something to give. Like, you got to get out there. And so I hope looking back from the angle of my family that they can say, Dad did those things, or Chad did those things, and I'm proud of what he did, and he did his best. Like, that's one angle. From the people who I serve and Coach Carson, like I hope, I don't have a quantity on this. Like, I don't know how many, but if it's 10 people, if it's 1,000 people, if it's 10,000 people, but they can say, you know what, like, him taking all that time to make that content and build this body of work, which is really how I'm looking at it, like the book and the courses and the podcast. I always imagine one of these days I'm gonna be like Forrest Gump when he's running, cross country 5 times, and he's like, I'm tired now. I think I'm gonna stop. Like, I gotta imagine someday, am I just gonna say, I'm done now, I've said all I need to say? It hasn't happened yet, but maybe I'm just like talking too much. But I hope that body of work that, whether it's 10 people or 10,000 people, say, that was really helpful for me. And if that had not been there, I'm not sure I could have taken that leap or taken that step in whatever small way it helped them. Like, if I look back and say that it's been, I don't have like grandiose visions of like, it has to be like the one thing that made the difference to them. But if it was like, it was helpful. And I think about your dad and your mom as teachers and coaches. Like, I think about, the quadratic formula and like some of these things that
she'll be so happy to hear that.
Yeah. I mean, for them, it was just what they did on a day-to-day basis, and they knew it like, they had it memorized. But for a kid sitting in that class learning, it was not only the content itself, but it was the teacher and who they were and the way they approached their job. And so kind of like the meta lessons, like, oh, they're really giving what they give, and they're a coach who gives something no matter, just because they love it and they're passionate about it and they care about people. And so I think that's the, looking back on it, role models, your parents, my parents, people who, kind of gave just because they give, and they're givers in life. And if I can look back on that and say, yeah, I left it all in the field. Like I gave 100%. I put it out there. I have these gifts that were given to me that I didn't ask for, but I left it on the field. I think that's all you can ask for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've always left it on the field. And I can say, for anyone listening, you may think Chad is doing a great job and he has lots of great content and everything, but I'd say as his friend, I'm even more proud of the husband and the father that he is. So I'm really proud of who you've become, the person that you are, and all these people that you're helping. And it's been cool to watch all this develop from the early years and early days. And it was so funny because your dad was kind of in real estate, and I was like, Chad's probably gonna do something totally different. Yeah. But it's funny how the road kind of came back, and now you're helping people with all this. So it's really cool to see.
Well, thank you. This has been fun. The idea for this 200th episode, I was like, this is a big deal, and who could I have interview? And I even asked my kids, I was like, I'm thinking of having, somebody else interview me. And my kids were like, oh, we can do it. Like, I wasn't ready yet.
Good.
I wasn't ready yet for them to come on the podcast. Yeah, maybe it's my own insecurities, but you were the first person I thought of. I was like, Matt would be great. Matt's a good friend. He's a storyteller. He's also just a genuine person. So I appreciate you taking the time to do it and spending your time interviewing.
It was a huge honor, and I held back a few stories because maybe we have to do this again sometime. Maybe we'll just have story time or something.
Yeah, we can do that. We can have the follow up behind the scenes.
If you guys
videos.
really want to know some stories on Chad, I can certainly share them, but you can't share ones about me. So,
okay, not the other way around.
Yeah,
all right.
I'm not this famous guy with a million people downloading stuff. Yeah.
No, well, thank you. Really appreciate it. And I want to briefly turn it back to you a little bit and to say, people are listening to you talk the whole time. Maybe you could tell a little bit about yourself. Just, we don't have to end the conversation here. Like what has brought you? I mentioned that you're in online media. I mentioned you're a teacher online too. Like, tell a brief version of what you're up to, and I want to give people a chance to stay in touch with you too.
Oh yeah, sure. Well, so my parents are teachers. You brought that up, right? Well, it's not just my parents are teachers. My sister's a teacher. Her husband's a teacher. My wife is a teacher. She teaches our kids at home. Her sister's a teacher. The husband's a teacher. Like everyone in my family, extended family, everyone's teachers. And here I found myself in the financial world, right? And so I was helping people with investments in stock market, mutual funds and ETFs and things like that, and insurance, life insurance, disability insurance, things like that. I just found that there was a need for a teacher in that area. People don't teach. There's always selling. People are always selling you things, but nobody's taking the time to teach you. And then I found that there was a really underserved group of folks called doctors. And so for 14 years, I actually had 2 businesses where I just basically took everything I knew financially. I turned into education for these doctors who, most people don't pity doctors because they make a lot of money. But at the end of the day, they go through such a strenuous training that they don't learn these things that we all learn in our 20s while we're out, getting our first bumps and bruises about life and finances and things like that. And so for about 14 years, I spent time educating them, helping them get the most basic thing, disability insurance. So if they ever get hurt, they can't work, or get sick and can't work, they still get some income. They can still live out some of their dreams for their families and things like that. But I'm kind of shifting now a little bit. I guess one thing I learned was, and this came from the insurance companies, they said like 90 to 95% of our businesses with doctors. So doctors are out there making all this money and they're protecting it. Well, why shouldn't everybody else? Why shouldn't the teacher? And why shouldn't the electrician? And why shouldn't the CPA or the attorney or whatever? So yeah, I'm actually in the middle of a transition right now where I'm moving away from doctors and moving into the general public and saying, why can't we take this information and help them do the same thing, help everybody else do the same thing doctors know to do? Doctors know to do this. My income's important to me. I need to protect it. So they buy disability insurance. So I'm just trying to take some of that same approach that I was using with the 1% out to the 99% and say, hey, this is probably something important for you. So yeah, I'm starting a company. It's called Insuravation. And
cool.
Yeah, love for people to come visit. It's just getting kicked off or finalizing some things. It'll be really unique in the space for insurance. It'll be different than anything else that's out there.
Yeah.
So
yeah, Matt was definitely educating me. We were talking before this conversation, and disability insurance is not something that was on my radar. It wasn't something I thought about. But as a financial educator, one of the tips I always give people is like your income and your ability to save income from your whatever active income you do is your number one engine for building wealth. And so if you invest in real estate and you're a nurse, that's how you save money. And if something happened, insurance is one of those things. It's not sexy to talk about. It's not that fun.
It's awful. I never thought that this would be what I do. But I'm kind of like you. So what you guys might not know, Chad and I, we've always been a little bit deeper thinkers in the sense of, I don't know, we even had a song back in the day. It was our friendship song, which we won't sing for you. But Chad and I think where we connected is we've always wanted to make an impact and help people. Yeah. And so he's found a way to help people through real estate investing, through creating passive income, through allowing them to free up their time and have autonomy. I'm kind of on the front end of that. Once you reach that place, maybe you don't need disability insurance and all these protective things necessarily, but there's a lot of people who are in the early phases of that. And if your income were to go away, which people don't realize, 1 out of every 4 workers from the time they're 20 till they retire get disabled and can't work for a long period of time. So it's a bigger stat than you know. And if that happens to you, this income generator, this machine, it's not going to allow you to do anything. The investing in the real estate, even just living life and paying your mortgage. So I guess I'm kind of on the front end saying, hey, while you're building and while you're trying to get to your goals, this income, whether you're making $50,000 a year or $350,000 a year, this is just as important to you as anybody else. And so if I can play my small role at the beginning, help teach people about it, to let them protect that income engine while they're building things, that's my heartbeat, is helping them early on. So.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I know from what I know of you, I know you're going to give it your 100% and to be successful with it. And we do need to do this again. Let's reconnect and we can have a more specific conversation on income. I think that's I think as you're building wealth, we have a lot of people listen to the podcast who are in their early phases of their earning careers and they're looking forward at these big goals. But yeah, those hurdles you hit along the way are real. And that's what knocks a lot of people off from accomplishing their financial goals. So Matt, thank you so much.
Yeah,
this has been a lot of fun.
Been fun.
Been one of my most fun interviews, the most fun interview that I've done on the podcast, having you interview me on my own. So really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you.
All right. I hope you enjoyed this different format for episode number 200. Really appreciate you being here today. If you want to find out more details, there's a show notes page that actually has an entire article I wrote with more details on a summary of 2021 and what you can look forward to in 2022 with Coach Carson. It includes things like what books I read this year, some of the stats of my real estate business, the kinds of things I'm doing there. So just basically a behind the scenes snapshot of 2021 if you're interested in that, and also what you can expect going forward. I also want to say thank you to each of you, the listeners of this show. At the end of every episode, I say it each and every week that this show exists because of you, it exists for you. And I just want to repeat that I mean that. And this show wouldn't exist if it weren't for your stories and the feedback you give, that it's been helpful to you. So it means the world to me. It means the world to the team behind the scenes who's helping bring this to you each and every week. I have a podcast editor, Michael Wen, a virtual assistant, Megan Thompson, and my wife, Carrie, who also helps me with Coach Carson. All of us work really hard because we hear your stories and we hear this helpful to you. So thank you so much for letting us know that. You can always send an email to me at podcast@coachcarson.com. It means a lot to get your feedback and to hear your stories and hear some updates from you on what's going on. So please always feel free to email me. I don't always get back to you right away. There's a lot of emails that come in or just different things I'm working on, like this content. But always love to hear from you. And I do want to thank those other people on my team, Michael, Megan, and Carrie, for all of their work behind the scenes. This has been a lot of fun, and there's a lot more episodes to come in the future. We're not going anywhere, and we're going to keep bringing it at least to you every Monday. There's some ideas in the future of maybe some additional episodes, but at a minimum, keep staying in touch. If you're new here, please subscribe so you'll hear from more of us. And be sure to subscribe as well to the YouTube channel, to my website with a newsletter. Those are other ways that I stay in touch with you each and every week. And the YouTube in particular is a tutorial based and often just kind of a shorter but more visual explanations and inspiration and stories from other people and from myself to how to use financial independence and real estate to do more of what matters. That's the mission around here. So hope you have a great new year. Wonderful to have you here today. And I will see you in the next episode.